Pam and I, when we first talked about that church way back when, we started that last year off with the surrender experiment. We were all giddy about the surrender experiment, and we were going to do it, I'm sure. And we have benefited from doing the surrender experiment. One of my favorite authors is Gene Shepherd. He wrote The Christmas Story. The one, Not a Finger. You know that story? Not a Finger. Love that movie. If you haven't watched it, you got to watch it. But he says, trust in God, all others pay cash. And that's it. That's what we trust in. We trust in God. But some of us go, well, what the hell is God? What is that? Like, what is God? What does it mean? What does God mean? Who is it? And how does it work? And so trust requires that we start to get intimate with our idea of God. To embrace that there is a power that's keeping all things safe. And that this power is called love. And at Speakeasy we say that, we're here to love more and fear less. And to activate that power within us. So trust is all about, cultivating that power. And it's not always easy. The Course in Miracles tells us that with enough trust, all of our problems would be solved now. But most of us are saying, I don't trust it, because we've hit bottom. All of us here have hit bottom in certain ways. We've been snagged and flagged and saddlebagged by all kinds of things in our life that have held us down and kept us from really knowing a true and complete intimate relationship with the divine. So, but the good news is we've also, each and every single one of us have been risen. Every single one of us has gotten back up. And we know we carry that within our DNA. That not only have we been knocked down, but we know how to get back up. And we do that really well. And, when we recognize that we have that power to get back up, and that power to get back up is God's grace that finds us in our dark hour and lifts us somehow. We've all been lifted by the grace of God. Course in Miracles says that, who would fly with the teeny wings of the sparrow when we've been given the wings of an eagle? Why would we trust again our little selves? But if God's gifts are to come to us, this grace of God, this power of God, it can only come to a holy altar. And the holy altar means we got to clear everything else off, God's gifts deserve that holy altar. And they don't need us going in the kitchen and stirring them or adding salt to God's gifts. Like, we don't have to put anything else on the altar, God's gifts are true and good and complete unto themselves. So the trust comes in just in making the space for that. And then backing away. So making space, how wide can you make that space for God? How much can you surrender for that divine to have its way with you? How free are you willing to fall into the grand plan? Like free fall into the competent hands of God. Like, how much do you really trust? You might say, I don't want to trust that much, because I don't know if that God's actually going to show up, like we said, we've been busted and broken in many ways, and we're not really sure. And I get it, I'm a resourceful girl from New Jersey from a dead mom, so that's my story. And we all have these stories, but we all have to let go of those stories. I get it. We have to let go of those stories. All of them need to be cleared. My dead mom story, your dead mom story, this divorce story, that divorce story, all of it needs to be cleared. All of the violations have to be cleared off so we can have that holy altar for the divine to, have its way with. Because these violations or these stories, sure, they can define us. Sure, they can define us because we can use them to help others with them, but they can no longer deny us. We can no longer let them deny us our brilliance. So only what is good and beautiful and helpful can remain for each and every single one of us. The rest needs to be burned away today. The rest we're going to all commit to burning away today, to clear that altar, to clear that mind. Frank's going to help by playing the bowls and help us to cultivate a really clear mind so that we can be, in Holy Communion. And Holy Communion, I don't mean by like some wafer that you get in church. Not that that's not a beautiful thing. That's a ritual. But rituals shouldn't get in the way of God. Rituals should lead us to God. So, and the optimal idea of that ritual is so that we have Holy Communion. Holy Communion means getting intimate with our divine. So it's best to come, even without the necessity for rituals. It's best to come without the parade and the procession and the plans and the agendas and the pleas to God, God doesn't need any of that. Not when God has a magnificent plan for you. You don't need to be giving God a script. So the idea is to lay aside all that fear, that God isn't going to be enough. That's funny, We think that God's not going to do enough for us this year. That's ridiculous. Or that God won't do it fast enough or in the way that we want it done, So God is going to do it God's way, and thank God that God's going to do it God's way, because our way is meager and small, and God's way is grand. And we really want to see if we can finally allow ourselves to have the grand plan of God and not our little sideways gig. It's exhausting us, right? The funny thing is, we think we have control. The funny thing is, we've never had control. We're not giving up anything, you know? We're really not giving up anything. When we say surrender, we're thinking, oh, I'm going to have to give up control. You never had control. You know, we never did. So we are not here, you know, we're not here to take control. We're not here to be large in charge. We're here to dance with God. We're here to let God lead us. Like a scrap of paper in the wind that swirls and surrender. That's the optimal idea for each of us. We're asked to get out of the driver's seat, to get into the passenger seat, to enjoy the view with God, to let go of the steering wheel, to shred the freaking map. We have no idea where we're going or what we're doing or what we need to say, but God does. And when we hand the control over to God, we're in good hands, you know? So the road that God takes are different than the ones that we're necessarily going to take. On Christmas Eve, this Christmas that we just had, I was invited to go down to a basement in some church, on Christmas, and I was like, I don't want to go to some basement church on Christmas, man, but I went, with my son. It was a 12-step thing, and when we got down to this basement, we found this little old lady all alone by herself in this little old basement in this old little church on Christmas Day. And that little love warrior was standing there for us. She was holding space for us to show up, And I got to see something that was so magnificent and so beautiful, and I got to hear her story. And the things that she said I can't share here because it was one of those anonymous things, but besides the words and the meanings, what I know is that gift that happened in that basement on Christmas Eve was one of the most beautiful gifts that I've ever been given on Christmas Day. One of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed on Christmas Day, and I wasn't planning to go, honestly, I'll be the first to tell you that I did not want to go to that church, in that basement on the church. I wanted to be home on a couch with a cup of tea staring at my Christmas tree. And if I was even more honest with you, I'll tell you what else I didn't want. I didn't want a son who's wrestling with alcoholism or with drug addiction. I didn't want that, But if I had gotten what I wanted, I would have missed the miracle in the basement. God knows so much better than me, So, now my best thinking is nothing compared to God's best thinking. And I have to be willing to give up my judgment because I'm not designed and we are not designed for judgment. We have no idea. When you turn your life over completely to God, yes, you'll find things falling away. You might even think like, hey, God, what the hell? I wanted that. Or something will show up and you'll go, oh, God, what the hell? I didn't order that. But that's the problem. What I want is the problem. Wanting is the problem. We have to murder our wanting. It gets us nowhere. The only thing worth wanting, the only way to make wanting holy is to be able to say, I want the peace of God. That was our lesson today in Course in Miracles. I want the peace of God. Otherwise, murder your wanting and trust that God is large and in charge and is delivering your highest and greatest good this year. This year is the year that it happens. If the loss of something is painful, it's only because you've given it undue meaning. If things seem to be falling apart, have no fear. There's no excess in God. God's plan is so lean, Things and ideas and dreams and hopes, if they're fading, if they're falling, if they're dying, let them die. It's okay. God's plan is so lean. It's so beautifully lean. It's impeccable. And don't question God's plan, but question everything else this year. Go ahead and give yourself permission to question everything else. Move into the mastery of surrendering means that we get to question everything. We get to begin to sort out what's valuable, what's not valuable, what's really impeccable, what's not impeccable. Is this helpful to complete my surrender with God, or is this hampering my surrender with God? If there is, this is where the letting go gets really good. Using the litmus test of this idea. Is this helpful or is this harmful to my surrender with God? It's that simple. It's a really simple question. If you do this with any degree of dedication, you will witness a shedding like a Siberian husky on a summer day. You'll be surprised at how much stuff you've been clinging to that you do not need, How much fear, how much unforgiveness, how much false fancies that hold no value for you. So we're moving into a greater idea of a greater intimacy with God. And we get to witness that actually all things have been helpful to our arrival to this moment. All things have been helpful to our arrival to this moment. It comes as quite a relief to realize that all things, events, encounters, and circumstances have actually been helpful. God can use everything to push forward the holy conversation. All things are made holy and helpful in God. However, we get to decide to what degree that they're helpful. Because we can stay in the classroom for a long time if we decide to. It's kind of like touching the oven. It's helpful that the oven has burnt me because I learned from the oven, right? Now, if I keep touching the oven, that's no longer to that degree. Like, okay, now I'm getting a third degree from the degree that I'm getting at how hot ovens are. I don't need that kind of a degree. And it's the same with you in relationships. Like, you know the things that aren't for you. They told you once. They don't need to tell you twice. You know, so really get to decide what is for me and what's not for me. For me, one of those things was alcohol. I had to give that up because I just had a, allergy to it. And that's okay, I can speak about that today as a gift. But you might have addictive relationships that you don't even know about. Maybe they're thoughts that continue to take you down. It's time to give those up. Put them on your plate, put them on the paper, and burn them in the fire. After we start to sort out the harmful to the helpful, the only thing we have to do after we've sorted out the harmful from the helpful is to stop choosing the harmful. That's it. It's so stupid simple, but it's the consistency with the choosing of it. You know what I mean? In the one program, we stay really consistent with our choice of it because it's very painful riding the fence. That's the most painful thing, right? So feed your love and starve your fears. And feed your desires and starve your distractions. Starve them to death so that you can manifest the desires of God. And then you might want to think, what am I distracted by? What's preventing me from being fully thrown open for God? Is it the fear of sacrifice? Is it the fear of losing something I don't have or not getting something that I want? Well, don't fall for that because God delivers everything. Any old thoughts, any old habits, any old ideas, any old securities, all of those need to be tossed away. And your mind needs to be left wide open. And it'd be a good time for us to vacate our comfort zones because actually burn your comfort zones. Put them on the paper too. Put all comfort zones on the paper. Nothing good has ever been raised from a comfort zone. Step out for God. Step out for love. Fall for God. Fall for love. And I promise you, when you do this, where you thought you might find pain or loss or grief, you'll find miracles. You'll find miracle workers in church basements that'll blow your fucking mind. And I did say fucking, there you go.
Oh, no. I thought it was going to be one. One without release.
That might be something that I put on I don't know. It's going to be hard.
Wow. I thought it was going to be a new year.
As Mommy would say, and there she
can
is.
bring the horse to water me. Give me rings. Anyhow, so it'll be. You will see. You will have miracles if you do this. If you really clear it for God, you will have this. So where you thought you were being asked for something, you will find gifts. But not ones that you knew to ask for, and not ones you would even put any value on. So you will find these gifts, not the ones you need to ask for and not the ones you would even put value on. When you reach this happy vantage point, which I know you will, and I know you've seen it before, and I know you're on your way and you're vacillating, but you're there, and we're all there actually, but when we reach this happy vantage point together, we'll find such great power in moving at the pace of peace. So let this year be about moving at the pace of peace and stillness. And in the stillness, you'll get to recognize all the synchronicities and all the serendipities that have brought you to this moment that aren't just for your own good, but all the ways your good has made a good impact on the world. From this view, from this vantage point, it's literally staggering how beautiful you are and your life is. That's how God sees you. And to maintain that vision, to maintain that state of nirvana, the last thing you will be asked to do, to give up, is judgment. Burn all your judgments. And set that all aside. Ask only what God would have you do in any circumstances. We're now each stepping in this sure direction, so divinely planned and impeccably choreographed, it would be hard not to surrender. But it is so worth it as you continue to surrender. And surrendering is like dancing with God. And I wanted to leave you with just a little picture that has visited me pretty often. I bet it's visited you. But have you ever seen an old scrap of paper, newspaper floating in the wind? Have you ever seen that amazing show, and it happens when you least expect it? And it's hard to value something that happens like that so spontaneously, because it's just a scrap of old newspaper, you know, it's twisting and twirling and in the wind. But in that moment, you might have had the thought, you know, to yourself, and you might have wondered, does anyone else see the beauty in this moment? This old piece of thrown away paper, this scrap paper? And it's funny and odd that I should be so mesmerized by this traveling trash, right? And yet it's so hard to deny the feeling of magic and wonder as we watch that paper take flight and perform this soul dance that feels like it's being done just for us. And as you take in that dance of that old newspaper in the wind, you might have felt within yourself an odd appreciation of something mysterious, something beautiful that's speaking right to you, that you couldn't really put words on. Well, that newspaper, that's you. And that newspaper, that's me. And that's what it looks like when we really surrender to God. That trashy dance is actually our most optimal state of being. And I'm sure you never thought someone would say to you that your most optimal state of being is that of an old scrap of thrown away newspaper, but bear with me. That old newspaper didn't know that it had a second life. It didn't know that it was a dancer. It didn't know that, it might have even thought that it was afraid of heights, because sometimes we've seen that thing go way high. It maybe even had the fear of the ability to dance with God, and maybe it even was afraid of visibility. And so it settled into this, its lot in life, this old newspaper, to be delivering bad news to bored people. It said, this is who I am, I just got to get through it. And then one day, when it thought it was done, and when it thought its purpose was through, that's when God used it. That's when it's completely surrendered. That's when God lifted it in the air, twirled it and swirled it in that immaculate choreography, and demonstrated for you and for me the mysterious ministry, the second breath of God that lives within all things. This is only a small example of what's possible for you this year, as you surrender into God's arms. This is what is possible for all of us. And what could be more desirable than this? Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more tips and tools on how to be a spiritual vixen, go on over to my website, MaureenMuldoon.com, and you can sign up for my love notes. Until then, I'm Maureen Muldoon, the spiritual vixen, reminding you to love more, fear less, and don't forget to laugh.